Let me ask you something uncomfortable. What if everything you were taught about success was wrong? Not slightly wrong, not a little off, but fundamentally, structurally, completely wrong. That is the central argument of a man named Naval Ravikant. And in the last decade, he has quietly become one of the most influential thinkers in the world. Not through books, not through a Netflix special, not through a TED Talk, but through interviews, long ones, often 3 hours long, the kind where you walk away feeling like you just had a philosophy degree downloaded directly into your brain. So today, we are going to do something different. We are not going to just tell you what Naval believes. We are going to examine the man himself. Because the gap between the prophet and the person is often where the most interesting truth lives. Let us start at the beginning. New Delhi, India. Naval Ravikant is born into a modest family. His father is a pharmacist, not rich, not connected, not Silicon Valley adjacent in any way. When Naval is 4 years old, his father moves to the United States alone, looking for a better life. Naval stays behind. 5 years pass. Then, at age 9, Naval and his mother and his brother board a plane to New York City. They do not land in Manhattan with a trust fund waiting for them. They land in the Bronx. His mother works multiple jobs. The family is tight on money, but here is what Naval does that most kids in his situation do not do. He haunts the public library, not for homework, for curiosity. He reads voraciously, philosophy, science, economics, fiction. He is building something in those stacks, not a career plan, something more foundational, a way of seeing the world. He gets into Stuyvesant High School, one of the most selective public schools in New York City. He graduates in Dartmouth, computer science and economics, class of 2020, then Boston Consulting Group, then inevitably Silicon Valley. In 2020, he co-founds Epinions, a consumer review site. It raises money from two of the most powerful venture capital firms in the Valley, Benchmark Capital and August Capital. Things look promising. And then the dot-com bubble bursts. By Sudi, the company is struggling. 3 of the 5 co-founders, including Naval, have left. The remaining leadership tells them that the common stock is effectively worthless. The company merges with a competitor called DealTime to form shopping.com. Naval and the other departing founders essentially walk away with nothing. Here's what they did not know. The board had been hiding a lucrative deal with Google that would have made the company significantly more valuable. If that information had been disclosed, the common shares would not have been worthless. The merger terms would have been entirely different. Shopping.com goes public, and then, in 40, eBay acquires it for $634 million. Naval gets none of it. In January Thursday, he does something that, in the tightly networked world of Silicon Valley venture capital, is considered professional suicide. He files a lawsuit in San Francisco Superior Court against Benchmark Capital, August Capital, and his own co-founder Nirav Tolia. He is, at the time, an entrepreneur in residence at August Capital, one of the firms he is suing. The case settles in December 7 for an undisclosed amount. But here is the part that matters beyond the money. Being deceived by the system he was operating inside of, and then fighting back against it at enormous professional risk, changes him. He and his co-author Babak Nivi create Venture Hacks, a resource designed to demystify the startup funding process for entrepreneurs who do not have an insider's education. And then, in Hyder, he builds AngelList. AngelList is not just a website, it is a structural correction. It is what happens when someone who was cheated by the closed, opaque world of Silicon Valley venture capital decides to open up that world to everyone. It democratizes startup investing. It gives founders access to angel investors without needing to already be connected to the right people. Naval Ravikant, the kid from the Bronx Public Library, builds a machine to break the door that once shut him out. But here is where the story gets philosophically interesting, because around the time AngelList is gaining traction, Naval begins to shift. He starts talking less about deals and more about stillness, less about equity and more about desire, less about disruption and more about the internal life. He goes deep into philosophy, not self-help philosophy, the hard stuff: Stoicism, Buddhism, Jiddu Krishnamurti, Richard Feynman, Charlie Munger. He synthesizes them in a way that is uniquely his own. In N, he releases a tweet storm called "How to Get Rich Without Getting Lucky." It spreads immediately and stays in circulation for years. It gets printed out. It gets framed. It gets pinned to the walls of dorm rooms and startup offices around the world. Here are a few lines from it because you need to hear them in his own words. You are not going to get rich renting out your time. You must own equity, a piece of the business to gain your financial freedom. Arm yourself with specific knowledge, accountability, and leverage. Code and media are permissionless leverage. They are the leverage behind the newly rich. You can create software and media that works for you while you sleep. Play long-term games with long-term people. All returns in life, whether in wealth, relationships, or knowledge, come from compound interest. These are not soft platitudes. These are hard structural observations about how economies actually work, and they landed because they named something that millions of people had felt but never articulated. The system is not designed to make you wealthy. It is designed to keep you employed. There is a difference. Now let us stop on the phrase specific knowledge, because this is where Naval diverges most sharply from conventional career advice. He defines specific knowledge as knowledge you cannot be trained for. If society can train you, it can train someone else and replace you. Specific knowledge is found at the intersection of your natural curiosity, your personal upbringing, your unique combination of interests and experiences. It feels like play to you but looks like work to others. That gap between what energizes you effortlessly and what exhausts other people is where your actual leverage lives. He often points to the creator of Dilbert, Scott Adams, as an example. Adams is not the world's greatest cartoonist. He is not the world's greatest business writer. He is not the world's greatest comedian. But he is the unique combination of all three, filtered through years of working inside a corporate bureaucracy. No one else has precisely that stack. That stack is his specific knowledge. That stack is what made Dilbert impossible to replicate. The implication for the rest of us is significant. Your specific knowledge is not on a resume. If it were, someone else could copy it. But Naval does not stop at wealth, and this is where it gets philosophically serious. He goes on record in interview after interview saying that his most important area of research is not startups, not investing, not even technology. It is happiness. And he approaches happiness with the same rigor he applies to engineering problems. He says this, and it hits with real force. Desire is a contract that you make with yourself to be unhappy until you get what you want. Read that again. Every desire you have is a pre-commitment to misery. You want the deal to close. You are miserable until it closes. It closes. You want the next thing. The cycle is structurally incapable of producing happiness. Naval calls this the monkey mind, the endless, anxious chatter of a brain optimized for survival on the African savanna, not for clarity in the modern world. His prescription is radical. Pick one desire. Let go of everything else. Let the universe help you get that one thing while you stop punishing yourself for not yet having all the others. He also says something that sounds almost incomprehensible coming from a man worth tens of millions of dollars. Retirement is when you stop sacrificing today for some imaginary tomorrow. When you are doing what you love, who you are, there is nowhere to get to. He is not telling you to work until 27 and retire. He is saying the entire concept of retirement is a cognitive error. If you are hating your present moment in the hope of loving a future one, you have already lost. And here is something he has said that is easy to overlook. He does not describe himself as a peaceful, enlightened person. He describes his own mind as frequently a mess, difficult and anxious and hard to quiet. He is not presenting a finished version of himself. He is presenting a method he is actively working through. The difference between Naval and most self-help gurus is that he admits he is not there yet. Now let us talk about a criticism. Because any honest examination of Naval Ravikant has to include the people who push back, and there is real pushback. The most serious critique is survivorship bias wrapped in philosophy. Critics point out that Naval built his wealth first, and then developed his philosophy of detachment from wealth. It is easy to say that desire is the source of suffering when your material needs are long taken care of. It is easy to say play long-term games when you already have the capital to survive the long term. The average American worker living paycheck to paycheck cannot simply decide to own equity instead of renting out their time. That option is not on their menu. The second critique is more structural. Naval's framework assumes a meritocracy. That specific knowledge, hard work, and good judgment are sufficient to create wealth if applied correctly. But critics argue that merit itself is not evenly distributed in opportunity. The kid who grows up in a wealthy suburb with access to coding camps, Ivy League networks, and family safety nets has a fundamentally different starting position than the kid who does not. Naval's own immigrant story is inspiring precisely because it is exceptional. Most people who arrive in the Bronx at age 9 do not end up building something that changes venture capital. A third critique is blunter. Naval's philosophy is fundamentally individualist to the point of social atomism. Life is a single-player game, he says. But is it? The last several years have made very clear that pandemics, economic crises, and systemic failures are not solo problems. They require collective action, institutional trust, and sometimes governments. Naval's world has very little room for any of that. His critics call his followers a tech bro cult, a community of people who have wrapped individual self-interest in the language of Eastern wisdom and called it enlightenment. That is harsh, but it is not entirely unfair. Here is what we actually believe, though. Naval Ravikant is not a saint. He is not a fraud either. He is something rarer and more interesting. He is a genuinely original synthesizer, a man who took the hardest ideas from multiple philosophical traditions, stress-tested them against his own real and documented experience of betrayal, failure, and reconstruction, and distilled them into frameworks that are genuinely useful for navigating modern life. His wealth framework is real. Specific knowledge leverage long-term games. These are not motivational poster slogans. They are structural observations about how modern economies actually allocate returns. His critics are right that they do not apply equally to everyone, but they are wrong to dismiss them entirely on those grounds. His happiness framework is also real. And here, interestingly, the survivorship bias critique lands less cleanly. Because desire is a contract for unhappiness is not a function of your bank account. It is a function of your neurology. Naval is not telling you something that only applies once you are rich. He is describing a mechanism that operates regardless of your circumstances. And on AI, his observation is perhaps the most counterintuitive thing he has said in recent years. He argues that AI lacks what he calls skin in the game. No authentic desire, no survival instinct. No real stakes. By the definition of intelligence as getting what you want out of life, he says AI fails instantly because AI does not want anything. In a world that is terrified of artificial intelligence replacing human workers, Naval is making an odd and interesting argument. The advantage humans hold over machines is not raw processing power or knowledge retrieval. It is desire. It is caring. It is having something personally at stake. And in an economy increasingly powered by AI leverage, the humans who know exactly what they want and are building specific, irreplaceable expertise around that desire will be the ones the machines work for, not the other way around. So here is the question we will leave you with. Naval Ravikant built his philosophy by escaping one trap, the trap of a poor immigrant kid who was supposed to have no options. He was deceived by the system, took it to court at personal and professional risk, and then built a different system. He rewrote the rules through specific knowledge, leverage, and relentless intellectual honesty. But here is the question his critics are implicitly asking, and that we want to make explicit. Is his philosophy a set of tools that anyone can use to escape their trap? Or is it a set of tools that only works once you have already partially escaped? Put it another way. Is Naval Ravikant showing you the exit, or is he just showing you the view from inside a very comfortable room? Drop your answer in the comments, because that question is not rhetorical, and the answer matters for a lot more than one man's philosophy.